Okay, after my first cameo appearance, I was not taking any chances. Anyway, so good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Responsible Business Live 2021. A really special thank you to everyone who's joined us virtually and to our studio guests. Really great to have you, future leaders from company members of BITC. So we've got a fascinating hour ahead. And so just to give you a quick heads up on what it looks like, you're going to have some reflections about BITC, and we'll kick that off with BITC CEO. And then we have an amazing panel, which will take up the second half of the afternoon. And so with that, I shall hand over to Amanda McKenzie, CEO of BITC.
Thank you. Thanks so much. And also thank you to Richard for earlier in the AGM and Gavin and to Salesforce for hosting us. And forgive my croaky voice, but I haven't got anything more gruesome, I promise. It is wonderful, Gavin, having you as our chair, and we are very, very grateful for Salesforce support for not only today, but some of the events through our anniversary year. So in preparation for today, I looked at what I've said at this event on previous years, and I certainly feel in some regards the speeches are interchangeable. But don't worry, this is a new one. But what hasn't changed is that business has a huge and increasing role to play. That we must move faster, be bolder, and almost unreasonable if we want to tackle what needs to be achieved. Another thing that's not changed is my dress. But of course, it's an ever-evolving picture, an ever higher bar, and I hope a more thoughtful world. So the immutable march of progress must carry on, and carry on still until our work is done. And for all the things that may not have changed, if we reflect on those 40 years as Gavin did, the change is almost inconceivable, and phenomenal progress has been made. In 1982, as a woman alone in a pub, you could be refused service if you were paying. I find that extraordinary. Obviously, that's where I was most of the time when I was 1982. And the Montreal Protocol was only announced in 1987, and that was to protect the ozone layer. Even only 15 years ago, health and safety meant not tripping up over a wire in the workplace. The phrase well-being didn't exist, and so it was that BITC launched our campaign on health in 2007. And BITC's Race for Opportunity campaign was launched in 1995 with 21 members. So for 40 years, business in the community has been levelling up. For 40 years, we've been championing making workplaces more equal. And for 40 years, we have been inventing what the responsible business of today really is. And when the Prince of Wales helped found us in 1982, he understood that the private sector could be a powerful lever to drive positive change in communities and that business would benefit from doing so. And how right he was. In fact, it has always been so. From the journey of patriarchal philanthropy from the likes of Cadbury and Lever 150 years ago, to the pioneers of making business a force for good in any ownership structure, a world where the very best companies now dedicated to embedding ESG good practice, we've always called it responsible business. A business which thinks about its obligations to its community because it realises it has no business without a healthy community. One which thinks about radical decarbonisation but is determined to leave no one behind as it does. And one that puts real effort and determination into ensuring that skills of its people are current and moving with the times. And a business that welcomes everyone and creates a safe, fulfilling, rewarding workspace. But I am probably teaching grandmas, as the phrase goes, because you would not be listening now if you did not agree. And of course, the trouble about defining things into acronyms like ESG and D&I is that we all know what they are conceptually, but the change is that real action and meaning can get bleached out as we rush to make a science of humanity and as we rush to create programmes for delivery. When sometimes the simplicity of creating a fair and sustainable world is all that we should hold in our minds, and it should occupy all of our mind as we stand unswerving in our intent to achieve it. Fortunately, BITC has been very focused on creating a fair and sustainable world this year. And to use a popular phrase from Wallace and Gromit, it's been a cracking one for impact. The MBRN, which Gavin talked about, 2 million people have now benefited. And that's now evolving into the job coaching programme aimed at engaging an army of employees in business across the UK to support SMEs, community organisations and job seekers through a series of coaching sessions. And we thank AXA and NatWest for their incredible support to launch that. And the fact that we have now 800 companies signed up to the Race at Work Charter, approximately 6 million employees across the UK work for a company that has signed that. Over 1 million jobs now falling under the Ban the Box programme, which means that job applications from ex-offenders will not judge them in the first instance by the worst thing they have done, instead giving them a chance. Our work on climate has been profoundly practical, defining actions companies need to take alongside success stories, working with our members to commit to net zero as near to 2030 as possible, whilst not leaving anyone behind in the process. Thinking about the jobs that need to be reskilled, the green products that are affordable, and the supply chains that need support. Let's not accidentally level down as we are greening up. And as the BITC Responsible Business Tracker developed as a strategic tool to help companies understand their own progress in regards of responsible business, if you recall, our ambition was that this would become a way to understand the responsible business health of the nation. Well, it now has a waiting list. There is real appetite and desire to constantly improve and learn from best practice. But we're at a crossroads. Can we honestly say we have done or are doing everything we could? Because I know I can't. But the solution lies not in wasted emotion, but in using that as grit and determination to drive practical action. And some great examples are inspiring our network this year, and I make no apology for how content-heavy this will be. This is what we do best, bringing business together with examples, responsible business at the sharp end. So starting with communities, to bring opportunities to those areas that have been or at risk of being left behind. About 5 years ago, I first talked about Blackpool. Look what's happened there. Anchored by business leaders, pooling their time, influence and resources, working in partnership with local government and the community, they have a plan built from the bottom up, the Blackpool Town Prospectus. It has resulted in Blackpool now being a beneficiary of £700 million worth of extra funding and a further £1 billion on its way to support the creation of 10,000 jobs, increase employment rates for 16 to 24-year-olds, tackling deprivation and creating 3,000 new quality homes. Or BP's work on the East Coast Cluster. Yes, it will capture the equivalent of half of the UK's industrial cluster CO2 emissions, but it will also create and support 25,000 jobs per year in places ravaged by the end of the previous industrial revolution. If you want to understand levelling up, look at our history. And community action need not be on a huge scale. It can be one person at a time, but many times, as Aviva have done in their Norwich Together initiative to tackle loneliness and build a city full of connection and cohesion. And what about impact in our workplaces? We now have 400 businesses engaged, and we've seen the number of companies growing who are deploying the Skills Builder framework. It's where they develop individuals from school through further education into and through employment. At last, one system for young people to navigate their futures by, led by the Skills Builder trailblazers such as Boots and KPMG. And Salesforce plugging the digital skills gap, as Gavin mentioned, empowering now nearly 3.5 million people. And critically, companies leading the way on the environmental agenda. At M&S, they have revamped Plan A to be net zero across Scope 3 by 2040. Have a read of it. Be inspired. From fibres to farming, this is not just any plan. This is an M&S sustainability plan. Or Anglian Water, who, using waste heat from their water recycling centres, built the country's largest greenhouses, which will grow 12% of the UK's tomatoes and create 360 jobs. Does that not make your heart sing? Or Sky, who have launched Sky Glass? Just think of the attention to detail across every aspect of design needed to create the world's first certified carbon neutral TV. So what next? Remarkably, 40 years ago, of those pioneering companies who came together to create BITC, 30 of them are still with us, still challenging us, and I hope us them, still driving us forward, and one huge thank you. You have helped pave the way for responsible business practice in this country. And we are particularly grateful to those founding members who have stepped up to support the anniversary year. Aviva, AXA, BP, Barclays, Credit Suisse, Diageo, Lloyds, NatWest, M&S for making the year possible and for enabling our first ever marketing campaign. A single brave message to show that business is a determined force for good. We are going to make work work. In addition to the 100 million reach that JC&Co are going to give us, just imagine the reach we can have and the impact we could collectively make if all our members use the campaign in their channels. If we are serious about the impact we can have and the role business plays, let's get this job done. So as we launch the anniversary year, you can expect a year of taking hope and inspiration from all that has been achieved to accelerate where we need to get to. So to Gavin, our chair, our board, our WISE board, our leadership teams, our regional and national boards, our ambassadors, our members, home team BITC, and the incredible network of people supporting us from the sidelines, thank you. Your dedication, commitment, passion to improving responsible business is why we are here. We can only ever be as strong as our collective strength, and when all directed the same way, that is truly powerful. And to His Royal Highness the Prince of Wales, we wouldn't be here without your leadership and vision. And from the bottom of our hearts, we thank you. So I'm now going to bring back Albertha, Charles, and take us through the panel discussion. But first I have a question for you, Albertha, because you are a partner at PwC. You see so much. You see the highs and lows of business. And, you know, what do you think companies are getting right at the moment? Where's the challenge? What makes you worried and what makes you hopeful?
So thanks, Amanda. So as a PwC partner, I've got a number of things I could say, but I'll work with my BITC race equality leadership hat on today. And for me, it has to be the deepening inequalities. The challenge that for me is the deepening inequalities we've seen emerge at the back of the pandemic. And so if you look at, you know, what's happened with job losses, you look at health impact, you look at just the experiences that different communities have had as a response of those key drivers, education and skills. A number of ethnic minorities groups have been impacted by all those three things, really increasing the inequality gap that we saw. And so there are regions in our country that again has been hugely adversely impacted. So for me, the biggest challenge the business society should be focusing on is rebalancing that inequality that has really crept up in our society. And so a key challenge, if I were asking for two things, I would say really investing in education and skills for those communities, those groups that have been disadvantaged. And the second one, it's really when we're looking at new job creation, when we're looking at green jobs, making sure that those jobs are being created where they're needed most. Because I think that's important. Because if we don't do that, I think we risk the communities that are already disadvantaged just falling back even further. And so that would be my ask. And actually I'm looking forward to talking to the panel about that because it's about, fair transition, it's about accelerating change, and it's really about what are the practical things we're going to do to really make a difference.
Well, that sounds incredibly wise words. I'm going to get out the way for our brilliant panel. So thank you so much.
Okay, well, thank you very much. And so what I'll do, I know you've got bios for all of our brilliant panelists, so I'm going to do very brief introductions of our panelists. And before we start with the introductions, I'm also wanting to get a little bit of the energy from the room Don't ask me how I'm going to do it, but I might just come to you and get a bit of a pulse every so often. So just keep a heads up for that. So let's start with the introductions. So I'm going to start with Amanda. So Amanda Blank, is my mic working? Yeah? So Amanda Blank, who is the Group CEO of Aviva PLC. Amanda has held several board positions across Europe, and she was recognized in Forbes' 2020 list of the 100 most powerful women in the world. On a more personal note, Amanda finds that being outdoors, loves it, and spending time with her family, really important. And I found out a huge rugby fan. With that, let's welcome Amanda to the stage. Next, we've got Steve Rowe. So Steve Rowe is the CEO, Group CEO for Marks & Spencer, and he's also the chairman for the Leadership Community Group at BITC. And what more can I tell you about Steve? Loves football. And wait for it, massive fan of Millwall. So, and when he's not at football, he's diving. Let's welcome Steve to the stage. And our final panelist, Louise Kingdom Obe. So Louise is the Senior Vice President Europe, Head of Country for BP in the UK. And she's also the Chair of Climate Action Leadership Team for BITC. And when I asked Louise, tell me a little bit about, your spare time. None left, taken by 3 children, keeps her really busy, and she also loves ballet. So let's welcome Louise to the stage. Okay, so before we start with our questions to the panel, quick pulse. In our studio audience, just by a show of hands, how many of you are feeling really positive about, events after COP26, and really positive that you will see some change, the kind of change that Amanda and Gavin have been talking about? If you're positive and expected to see change, hands up. Okay, so what we'll say, that's what, 40, 45%? Yeah, about a bit 50? Yeah, 50? Yeah, so thank you for that. So let's start with our first question. And if I may, Steve, I'll start with you. So in September this year, you set out your strategy, net zero strategy for Marks & Spencer. And in that, you set an ambition to be net zero by 2040 and a commitment to cut carbon emissions by 1/3 over the next 3 years and by 1/2 by 2030. That sounds like really transformational change. So how are you going to drive that in your business?
Well, the first thing is that any transformation has to be led from the top, and it has to be owned by the top, and it has to be done with integrity and real authority and commitment. I mean, it's something I personally believe in, and M&S has a great history in this transformation, starting in 2007 with Plan A. I can go back even further. In 1983, Lord Seif ran a scrutiny in our business about energy usage and how to cut back the use of energy. So it's really been in our DNA for a long time. Really 5 things. First of all, we've got to make sure that we've got science-based targets and understanding of the issues. And one of the things that COP26 started to deal with is getting rid of the greenwash that is sitting outside. If we're going to make a difference, we've got to make sure we're attacking this in the right way. On top of that, we have to make sure that it's built into our purpose. Now, M&S has relaunched its purpose at the same time, and one of the strategic pillars is to ensure that we've got a sustainable future, not just sustainable in financial terms, but in terms of the environment, doing the right thing for the community and the world that we trade in. We then need to make sure that we've got the programme office up around it, and it is part of our transformation work. We've got 10 major targets, and they're immediate targets. And the reason we've done the 3- and 5-year targets is lots of CEOs will kick this down the road in 2040, 2050. I think there was an article recently said that there will be 4 or 5 or 6 CEOs in most FTSE companies by the time we get to that point. I intend to make sure that there is immediate action, and that's why we set the target to take 2 million tonnes out within the next 3 years. And then on top of that, we have to make sure that every leader has a target and a clear path to do it, and there's a 10-point action plan in M&S as well. The next stage involves our people, and they're really important. Firstly, every individual has to own this, and M&S does have a history of this, but we want to make sure every individual can play their part and knows what they've got to do. And to help that, we've built green champions, carbon champions we call them, with a green network that everyone can join in, and these carbon champions are across the business specialising in different aspects of carbon removal. And then we have to move on to customers and supply base. And of course, Scope 3 means we have to get all of this out. We were carbon neutral in 2014 on Scope 1, the first major retailer to do that. It's only 6% of the total emissions that we have to deal with by the time we get to 2040. And so we know that we can't do this on our own, a bit like business in the community, a bit like the thing I chair, communities. It's about business coming together and making a difference. And that means our supply base, it means the government, and importantly, it means our customers. And once we've done that, we have to measure ourselves ruthlessly and not accept failure. We won't get it all right on the first go. The science will change between now and then. Mm-hmm. And we have to keep abreast of that and keep making a difference. So 7 points plan. But something we fundamentally believe in, and I hope that in 2040 we're all here to celebrate the fact that we are carbon neutral in the business.
Thank you for that. Really operationalizing it at every level and driving ownership in the business. So thank you for that, Steve. So shifting from retail to financial services, Amanda, what are your perspectives? How is Aviva driving and accelerating change around the net zero agenda?
Yes, so actually we have a very similar goal. So we've committed to be net zero, Scope 1, 2, and 3 by 2040, which is no mean feat. I mean, Steve has articulated, for us we have something like 350 billion of assets under management. So that means that they all have to have, a plan to net zero. So I think we have a huge role to play. So we can build our own products that are sustainable. We can make sure that our business itself, in the way it operates, is sustainable. But we also have a huge influential role in the businesses that we invest in with our portfolio to make sure that they become sustainable. So, we have a very articulate plan around our top 30 carbon emitters in the world, and that we invest in, that we work with them on a transition plan. And that's a really important part of the work that Aviva Investors does. So I think our role is huge, but I think as individuals, we can focus a lot on sustainability with, eating less red meat or driving less or traveling less. But actually, the biggest impact you can make is the way you invest your pension. That is multiple times more effective than stopping eating meat or stopping traveling by airplane. If you invest in sustainable funds, if you invest in those businesses that are going to change the world, you can have a major impact. And so we have a huge role to play there as the pension provider to sort of 1 in 7 of the UK population. So I think that's a responsibility I think that we feel. And I think financial services, as you saw in COP26, with the role that Mark Carney and the GFANS team did, they brought together over 100 trillion of assets under management together. The impact of that's just massive. So we're pretty excited about the role that we can play, and a bit daunted.
Yeah, so that's really exciting. So it's about using the power of finance for good, as I think Amanda mentioned before. So some really practical actions and quite wide-ranging. And so if I just shift the conversation to the inequalities and disparities, the point that is quite dear to my heart. So before I put a question to you, Louise, I would just like to get a bit of a pulse from the audience. How many of you think that big business has a key role to play in reducing that social inequality? How many of you think that? Wow. I think that's basically 100%.
We can vote
me too.
Can we vote?
Right, okay, right. So for those of you who are joining us virtually, that was 100%, right? Nearly, right? And so, Louise, to you, what is the role of large corporations in actually delivering a transition that is fair and equitable while still managing and to meet the needs of their stakeholders?
Great question. I think the audience have just said that big business has to lead. I think that's what their full house of hands up was all about, and I completely agree, actually. And it's part of the reason why I left the voluntary sector to go into corporate life in my middle age, well into my middle age, and in all honesty, in order to help and contribute to that journey. So, and for the energy sector, it's a particular challenge, and for the oil and gas industry, it's an even bigger one. But really, if we're to be on the road to Paris and we're to be successful, we need to follow and go where the emissions are, and we need to, as you've heard, we need to remove them and drill down on them. And the energy sector, along with industry and transport, that's where 70% of the global emissions are in the system. So we have a big job to do and a massive responsibility. So I personally believe, and I know the company does, that we are beholden to make a big contribution to that. We've been part of the problem on the journey, completely understand that. We've got people that don't necessarily subscribe to big business, particularly in the energy sector, making a contribution that's positive. But actually, if we don't go on that journey and lead from the front and also be successful, then all the fabulous innovation that's there in the green industries already today can't do it on their own. It's just not possible. So the drivers that are being talked about from the financial community, every sector across the economy doing their bit, big business has to be up front and working with its partners, with its customers, with its employees, everyone who's an important stakeholder in order to get there. And I think the kinds of things that in practice that looks like for an organisation like ours is absolutely looking to invest and for BP, particularly at home, is important as a place to invest in the UK, but it's about trying to build sustainable supply chains, it's about reskilling, upskilling, it's about understanding as you become a high carbon business moving to being a low one, that you take people with you. So we workforce plan, we look at the jobs we're going to create, we look at the skills we're going to need. And a very quick example, in Aberdeen, we've got an oil and gas workforce. They will be Teesside's hydrogen and carbon capture workforce of tomorrow. And there's a planned transition for how we do that over a period of time, because it will take time. We can't do it tomorrow, unfortunately. I would love to. And a lot of that is about, as has been said by Steve, working with the local communities, listening to community leaders, understanding what's required. So business working with, not doing to, I think is really, really important.
Yeah, so clearly, strong leadership across big business is what we're hearing, with really practical, implementable actions. I want to just home in on how we do that fairly, so that the disparities I talked about are not accelerated. And so, when you talk, the government is looking at levelling up agenda, I want to go into that agenda. And Steve, with your hat as chair of the sort of community leadership board, what are your thoughts on that, the equitable, making it fair for everyone?
Well, look, I think business in the community, its origins are in levelling up. I mean, it's the original levelling up organisation, and Boris has jumped on the back of it. But fundamentally, this is another thing where not one organisation can do this on its own. It does take collaboration, and it does take holistic views. And that just equation, as you talk about, making sure that we move and transition from one type of economy to another, has to be done not just by industry, but across the whole country. Yeah. And we have to make sure that we replace certain types of jobs with other jobs and opportunities for everybody, whatever their background, and whether that's through education or workforces. We have to make sure that's a really important part of what we do as part of that communities workshop. It's on every agenda, how we make sure that the transformations we're doing in towns and places across the UK is equitable, and making sure the opportunities actually help more of the deprived individuals in this economy and not just affect the top of the organisations. And so everywhere we go, there are lessons learned. We share those. There are fantastic programmes in terms of community change, whether it be from Bradford to Scunthorpe. Things are taking place in Birmingham, in Anglia, and all of those are being shared between the members of this organisation. And I think that's how you do it, a holistic view, sharing, and constantly keep coming back and appraising it.
Yeah, thank you very much for that, Steve. And conscious we have, our emerging leaders in the room. And so our conversation so far has really been about all the positive stuff that our senior leaders are doing, yeah? And so I'd just like to explore the leadership angle a little bit more. And so Amanda, if I can come to you, what do you think we need to be doing in terms of embracing a broader, more diverse leadership group in really trying to solve that problem?
Yeah, okay. So, I mean, this is something that I think about all the time, and I'm sure every exco, thinks about this. It's a really important problem because exactly as Steve said right at the very beginning, we're not yet responsible or sustainable businesses. We're on the journey to become responsible, sustainable, diverse, inclusive businesses. So we will hand that, responsibility, that baton over to somebody else, at some point. And so you really have to think about your role in this. And we do lots of stuff at Aviva, and I could tick off the list. We have communities where we try to ensure that, whether it's the disability community, the age community, the gender community, the pride community, to make sure that we're hearing lots of different voices. We have reverse mentoring, we have leadership programs, we have everything else. But I'd like to say that all those things are working and making a difference to seeing more diverse and more inclusive leadership coming through and more populations coming through the organisation. But they're not. If we carry on at the rate we are now, if we even just take gender, if we move at the pace we're moving now to gender diversity, it'll be 2050 before we have equality in the UK, and it's just not good enough. So I think that what business needs to do, and what I think we haven't cracked it yet, and this is where I think it is a team sport, it's not a competitive thing, is work together to share best practice on what is working in every organisation to improve the dial on these things. So what are organisations doing? And I think organisations are treating these things too much like tick box exercises. Sorry, I try to be positive, but I just don't see the dial moving quickly enough. And you've basically got to treat it more like a business problem. And you've got to put it on the business agenda, not on the people agenda. And because it is so vitally important to have a diverse and inclusive business. And if you don't do that, we will never move. Because all of these programs, for as long as I remember, and I'm looking at Lucinda, who was I worked with as a HR director back in 7-8 years ago, we had all these things on the agenda then. And I'd like to say that things have moved on, but I just don't think they're moving quickly enough. So that's my view, is that we as businesses, and this is where I think business in the community can help, how do we work together to share so that we can actually make some real progress and not just talk about stuff that we do?
Thank you for that, and it so resonates, and it is a passion of mine as well. Now, I'm conscious of time, and I want to get our audience, and I want to hear some questions from you. And so, before we go into questions from the audience, I just want to get your sense of how many of you think that business is doing a good job with engaging with you as the next generation of leaders to solve the transition challenge? Wow. That's a very clear message. So if there's one thing, and might I say, BITC, to our members, that is a very clear message. We need to do more to really engage our next generation of leaders. And so with that, since we have you here, I'd like to get your voice into the room. And so you have submitted loads and loads of questions. We haven't got enough time. so I'm going to just try and get a few of you. And so if you can ask our panelists to help me with that and be as brief as you can in the answers, I'd really appreciate it. So when you ask your question, if you could just say your name and your company and the question. Emma, have we got Emma in the room? Emma from Sky. Oh, yes. Emma, we'll get you a mic. Yeah.
Trying to remember my question now. So lots of businesses have either moved to a hybrid model or are considering it. How can we ensure we don't lose momentum in driving positive change within organisations given this new way of working?
So hybrid model, how do we make sure that does not create a barrier for us? So Louise, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, I mean, and I have the privilege of working with Emma as a future leader, so it's probably good that it comes at me first, and I didn't know it was coming, to be fair. I think, in the previous organisations I ran before coming to BP, they were already 100% flexible working, and this is some years ago. That was created by a gentleman saying to me that he wanted to co-parent, so he wanted a job share, so we worked out how to do it. And we learnt by doing. I think there's a lot of upsides that we've learnt from in terms of how hybrid working can be effective for everybody. And so it's safeguarding the best bits, isn't it? And making sure that that's done fairly. And it starts with policies and practice. Is that set up right? Then it's about people who lead people and making sure that culturally they are being inclusive, they are behaving in a way which is going to encourage people to feel safe and confident about working in this hybrid way and sustaining that. So in a nutshell, that would be the answer for me.
Okay, thank you, Louise. And do we have Tanya from BITC?
Yeah. From BITC. 2021 is the first year that we've seen a reverse in progress against the global goals. So what is the one big change that we think we need to see in business to be able to achieve the goals by 2030, and how can BITC support in this?
Steve?
So which goals particularly did you say? Sustainable development. Yes.
Yeah.
Look, I think it's been an unusual year. Let's be clear about that. And we've had many, many issues to face, but as business and as societies. The key thing is that we start to refocus on what it is we said we were going to achieve. And we get tangible plans in place to make sure that we are starting to deliver against those things. I think it's really interesting. We talk about hybrid working. 50,000 of my people, there is no hybrid whatsoever. We're there to serve communities and customers with food and clothing every day, and we open our shores every day. And we mustn't forget that some of the changes in society are not affecting everybody, but there are massive divides in society. And I think all that does is start to put additional weight in the programs we've got across BITC, not just the sustainable targets, but it really is about refocus and delivery.
Thank you, Steve. I'm looking at Amanda for time. How are we doing? We carry on, okay.
Could I just quickly add to that one?
So
Would you mind if I just 30 seconds?
Yes.
So my answer to build on Steve's would be to say, then no hands went up when you said, do you feel like you're being heard as future leaders? So the answer to your challenge is that every hand in the room is up because you've been given the voice you need in order to do the job and make the changes that maybe we're not being fast enough at doing today.
Okay, thank you. And I've got a question from Vincent from Youth Advisory Panel.
Hello, my name's Vincent. I'm from Grant Thornton, and I did have a pre-prepared question, but I just read it and I think it's a little rubbish, so I might ask something else. There's not much security around this, so I think I'll get away with it. I think it's 39% of people of influence in the UK were publicly educated. And that figure gets more stark in government, people that make the laws that govern our countries and govern how our businesses act. So the biggest determinant for what you're going to be in the future isn't actually what colour you are, what gender you are, what sexual orientation you are. It's what did your parents do before you were born. So what I wanted to know is what are your businesses doing to ensure that in the future you can't simply pay to play?
Do you want to take that one, Amanda?
Yeah, no, I will take that one. I think it's a really good point, and actually, when we looked at COP26 and the gender split and the people that were influencing the policies at COP26 and all the governmental, it was, there was, I think it was, 90% of men, 10% women when you looked at that, and the ethnicity diversity was not there at all. So I think your point is really well made. Things are predetermined a long time before you get to that point. So what we do at Aviva is a lot of outreach work in the community, we're in the sites where we are, in Norwich, in Perth, in York, to make sure that we were into the schools that are not the public schools. so that we actually can start to build, if you like, our future talent pipeline way, way, way before people start thinking about it. And we have a bigger challenge because people don't wake up in the morning wanting to do insurance. So we've got a double barrier to overcome, in that we've got to persuade people it's a really exciting career and that they want to come and work for Aviva. So we do a lot of that. We've run black internship programs in our London business, in our Aviva Investors team, which has been incredibly successful in bringing in different socioeconomic groups into Aviva. And they came in and they were like, we didn't realize this was for us. We didn't realize that this was a career that we could have. And so we have all of these conversations. You've got to have the conversation first. Some of the conversations are really difficult. Then you get into the bits around your recruitment policies and how people are selected and, you know, the panels you put onto. All of that is great, but still when you come out of the funnel at the end, it can still quite often look the way it always looked before. So I think you have to start right at the grassroots level and say, you know, let's be really close to the communities that we want to recruit in and the schools that we want to recruit in, and bring brilliant people into the organisation from all parts of society, because our customers, our 16 million customers, do not all come from public schools. I came from a comprehensive school, and so, you know, in South Wales and the Rhondda Valley, and so I know that background, I know and understand it, and we need to be connected to those communities. But it's not a job done. It's like I said earlier, we can put all of those programs in place, but if what comes out the other end still looks and feels the same, we're failing. So we've got to somehow find better ways of doing it. So ideas welcome from people in this room.
One more, yes. And so have we got Simone from Aviva?
Thank you. Hi, Simone Aviva. So from my experience, short as it may be, I've noticed that sort of long-term sustainability ambitions are often in conflict with like shorter-term profitability targets. So, and whilst it's been proven that, you know, acting sustainably, whether that be through taking climate action or supporting vulnerable customers or through our communities, will deliver longer-term growth, I think some leaders are reluctant to take the actions necessary because of what that will do to short-term targets. So my question to the panel would be, how do we combat that? And also, just to clarify, that's not just leadership from the top, that's from leadership throughout different levels of the company as well.
So short-term conflict, short-term targets. Steve?
Well, first of all, I refute any suggestion that these are mutually exclusive. M&S has saved over £240 million through Plan A, and we continue to make great savings, whether it's through energy or construction or anything else. Simply cutting food waste, for example, is saving us tens of millions of pounds a year. The second thing is that sustainable business is about sustainable business in terms of profits, and also sustainable in terms of environment. And therefore, you have to work hard at some of these things. They're not easy. But once you set the agenda that gives you time to make those changes, and you seek innovation in the right places, there will be a solution. And so I think, yeah, if somebody says you've got to save 10 million tomorrow morning and invest in such and such at the same time, that's almost impossible. That's bad planning. That's not a mutually exclusive target.
Okay, well, thank you. Now, I have just one closing question for the panel, and I'm going to ask you to please try and answer it in one sentence. So, as BITC members, right, what would you tell organizations out there who haven't joined? Why should they join, and how can BITC help them with that transition to net zero? In one sentence, please.
Well, I think...
Well, I will start with...
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, I think for me, you always want to be in good company, and this feels like good company.
Thank you.
That's a great answer.
Great answer. Yeah, and I like the one sentence.
And you're at the end of the line.
One sentence.
I can literally relax now.
I think similarly, you know, you're among friends, and it's a difficult journey. It's going to be hard, but actually working together, we'll crack it.
Collaboration, strong theme. Something different from you, Steve.
Okay. Thanks very much, ladies.
Sorry.
Seeing that for me. Old M&S thing. Business is at its best when it gets the balance right between its shareholders, its colleagues, its customers, and the community it lives and works in. And I think BITC is the perfect example of that.
Oh, what, that's a great...
Wow.
Good line.
Pro, what a pro.
So with that, all I'm going to say is a huge thank you to, weren't they absolutely amazing panel. Thank you so much.
I mean, I don't know about you, but I know the voices in the room feel quite rightly you want to be heard, but I also feel that British business is in pretty amazing hands, and not least with our chair, but Steve, Amanda and Louise, fantastic. Thank you so much. So we are literally a few minutes from the hour, so I'm going to say to Gavin, and thank you so much for chairing us for a whole year. I'm glad you're sticking around for the next one. And reflections on this afternoon? What are you hearing? How are you feeling?
I think in a word, I would say inspired. You know, the look back over the last 40 years, the anecdotes from your speech, the video from His Royal Highness, you know, the stories about how far we've come made me feel extremely proud and realise actually we have made a lot of progress. But at the same time, I look at the crisis that's in front of us, and maybe it's not just one crisis, it's multiple crises. You know, sustainability, equality, the skills agenda, to name just three. I think our work has never, ever been more important. And I'd say the single most important thing I took away from the panel was the importance of working together, collaborating, sharing best practice, and solving this problem by working as a team. I think that's probably the most powerful thing I heard.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Albertha, thank you for sharing us through the last couple of hours. Amazing. And I love that last question in particular. That was fantastic. So that's it, really. Thank you so much, everyone. Please engage in our 40th anniversary year. Let's build on those 40 years, and let's make sure the best is yet to come.